Just making sure I'm not muted. I am not. Okay. Hello out there, YouTube. What's going on, guys? It is D-Dun here, the most chill COD player. And today I'm doing actually a requested video. This was requested by one of my friends who is also a subscriber and watches me and we play together. He asked that I do an in-depth guide into how to build a class setup. And I think this is actually a great idea because instead of just saying these are the meta guns and these are the only attachments that you should put on them, I'm going to go through the different classes of weapons and the different um, kinds of attachments and explain what you're looking for so you can build your best class. Because there are some classes that people might use that are more advanced players that maybe aren't as good for a less than average person, someone with like a lower KD. Um, maybe they only play on the weekends and they don't have a ton of guns unlocked. And so they just work with what they have. And this will help you pick out the best attachments for those guns and hopefully give you a little bit more of a fighting chance in Warzone. And for advanced players, maybe you'll learn something new here as well. So I am live streaming this just in case someone joins and has questions. But this will be a standalone video and then I'll be live streaming some public games or some live games after. So I may not do. Okay, so let's start first with SMGs. Actually, sorry. Let's start with assault rifles just because it's first category. We'll work our way down. But like assault rifles, battle rifles, marksman rifles, LMGs, like those all kind of fall in the same category. Long range, fully automatic or semi-automatic burst fire guns, whatever. Generally going to be following the same rules. So let's start. I'll do the subverter right now just because that is or previously was a meta gun. It might still be up there in the meta. But let's pick it. We're going to go completely blank here and kind of go through the thought process of when you're picking attachments. So, first of all, if you don't know, when you click on an attachment and then you hit, it's just below all of the bars where it says damage, fire, range, accuracy. Just below that, for me, it's L2. I don't know, depending on your setup, what the button will be. But if you hit show details, it will give you a pretty good list of statistical data that you can look at to gauge how good or bad a weapon is and how you might be able to use it most effectively. For those who don't know, which should be everyone, I do have a degree in data analytics. So data is something that I'm used to working with and seeing a lot of, and it's something that I nerd out on. So the addition to this in this Warzone has been fantastic. So you can see the damage profile, the range, recoil, mobility, handling, accuracy, and fire rate. These will kind of give you some clues as to how you're going to best use the weapon. Generally speaking, lower fire rate weapons have higher damage and longer range, but tend to have more recoil. And then you have like fast firing weapons with lower damage that are usually easier to control, but maybe don't quite pack that punch. So some things to look at when you're looking at the damage is you want to look at upper torso and headshot damage, I think, more than anything, because that's where you should be aiming, is the, chest, upper chest, neck, and head area. Some guns you may find maybe aren't that good when you hit just chest and shoulder shots, but if you mix a few headshots in there, they're fantastic. That is something like the Holger 5.56. When you look at this, this has, a 50, almost 50 headshot damage, which is absolutely massive. That means if you were to somehow hit all headshots, you could kill someone in, I think, 7 bullets. So, but back to the subverter here. So we're looking at our stats. The effective damage range means the highest damage value that you will be doing will be within, in this example, 20.6 meters. So the max amount of damage that I will do with each shot, it maxes out at 20.6 meters and then starts to fall off after that. And the least amount of damage I will do starts at 41.9 meters into infinity. Bullet velocity is 810 base, which is pretty good. So as a general rule of thumb, long range weapons, you want, I would say, around 700, 750 at the very, very minimum. This means at long distances, you will have to lead your target. The lower the bullet velocity, the more you'll have to lead. So clearly, the higher the bullet velocity, the less you have to lead, the easier it will be to hit your target or shoot people out of the air, shoot people parachuting in. So bullet velocity is very important. And then there are some hidden stats. So you will see under the accuracy tab, there's hipfire spread, tactical stance spread. Those generally aren't that important unless you are specifically building something for hipfire only or tactical stance. So I would disregard that for the most time. And handling, mobility are very important as well. So when it comes to handling, as a general rule of thumb, for your long range weapons like your ARs, your LMGs, you want to keep the ADS speed around like 300-ish to max of, let's say, like 500. 500 is very slow. That's like LMG and like kind of fast sniper speed. 300's like pretty good and pretty average, I think. Also, your sprint to fire time, that's the amount of time it takes for you if you are sprinting to be able to pull the trigger and shoot your gun. So for the subverter, if I am sprinting and I pull the trigger to shoot, it will take 268 milliseconds. So again, like you're looking for like 250, 350. We'll call it that range. So now when it comes to picking your muzzle, you want it to reflect the recoil control that you want, but there's also some other things to look at. So I could probably take this off the favorites. So the two most used, I think, are the Zim compensated flash hider and the Cassis brake. Those are probably the two most used attachments, and that is because if you look at the pros of this, it has both of these have firing aim stability. Firing aim stability means that when you shoot the gun, there will be less just visual shake. It doesn't affect the recoil pattern at all. It doesn't change how much the gun kicks one way or the other. It just makes it smoother when you shoot. By contrast, when you add, most suppressors do not have firing aim stability. So a popular one is the sonic suppressor because it boosts your range and your bullet velocity without any penalty to ADS speed. So let's put this on. We'll do a quick run through. So you can kind of see like the gun is shaking quite a bit. And when I take it off and say add the Cassis brake, should look a lot smoother. And the recoil feels like it's easier to control simply because, well, it does have benefits to the recoil, but it also has that fire and aim stability. So the gun just literally does not shake as much. So when you are picking your muzzle, what you're going to look at is, of course, how and if it affects your recoil, if it has firing aim stability, and then you'll also want to look at if it adds bullet velocity, which again, we talked about is very important. Damage range can be important depending on what gun you're using. And those are the main things. So bullet velocity, aiming stability, recoil control, and of course, how it negatively affects your weapon. So, for example, this suppressor, keeps you off the radar. It gives you bullet velocity. It has fire and aim stability and recoil control. So you might look at this and think this is an excellent choice. But in my mind, I would never use this because it has a drastic effect on ADS speed. 23% is massive. 350 milliseconds is incredibly slow. And once you start stacking other attachments, which will also impact ADS speed, this gun will feel so sluggish that unless you are already pre-aimed at someone, there's virtually no shot in a head-to-head gunfight that you're going to win, because the other player is more than likely going to be able to scope in and land shots faster than you can even pull your gun up. So that's an example of an attachment that maybe looks really, really good, but me personally, I would never use. And that's why, again, the Cassis brake and the Zim compensator are two of the most popular ones, because they have fire and aim stability, the recoil effects are generally very positive, and the detractor on the ADS speed is very low. 5% is very low. So those are the things you're going to look for. Again, you can pick whatever you want. But generally speaking, I would say you're going to find more success by following these rules, by just looking for things that improve your gun with fire and aim stability, some recoil control, but don't hurt your ADS speed or sprint to fire speed or something like that incredibly harshly. On all of my setups, I don't think I run a suppressor on any of my setups, and that is mainly just because of the massive benefit of fire and aim stability. I cannot stress this enough. It makes the gun seem to have no recoil. This is something that you saw on the Ram 7, because when you stacked certain attachments on it, it just didn't move at all. It looked like you were shooting, and it felt like you had zero recoil. And a lot of people who maybe are not as adept, I think, at understanding the game mechanics would see popular streamers and use this gun and think that they were cheating in some way or using mods because the gun seemingly had no recoil. So take that as you will, but general rule of thumb, what you're looking for is some recoil control. You want some element of fire and aim stability without a massive detractor to your ADS speed. So if you were going to run a suppressor, like this scratch suppressor might be pretty good. It doesn't hurt your ADS speed hardly at all. It has fire and aim stability. If the gun is already low recoil, then you don't necessarily need it to control recoil. So yeah, it's not a bad option. But a lot of these, like I said, do tend to impact the shake of the gun. And to me, that's very important, because when you are playing against the better player you're playing against, the faster they're going to kill you. So your ability to put bullets into your target faster than your enemy, to me, is more important than staying off the radar. That's how I view it. If you value stealth, then by all means use a suppressor, but just make sure you're choosing one that isn't going to absolutely kill your gun and make it harder to actually hit the person that you're aiming at. All right, I need just a brief drink of water. I'll be back in literally 10 seconds. Okay, so that is muzzles. Barrels are going to vary depending on gun to gun, but generally speaking, you're going to have ones that improve your mobility because it's a shorter barrel, or ones that are going to improve your recoil range but harm your mobility. So for your long range guns, for your ARs, your LMGs, your battle rifles, handling is not incredibly important, but again, you don't want to go over those ranges I said before, because you do want to have some element of mobility in case you get caught out, or if you find yourself in a situation where it's you versus another player, whoever aim down sights first and gets your shots on target, is going to win. So more often than not, for your long range guns, you're willing to sacrifice some sort of mobility, especially if you get benefits like you do for the long barrel on the Subverter, for example. You see massive improvements across the board on recoil control and range, And 8%, 10% on ADS speed and sprint to fire speed, those penalties are at the maximum of really what you would want to see. But I'm willing to accept that because the benefits are drastic, you know. So, and again, it will vary from gun to gun. Some, like this only has 2 barrels, some guns have like 6 barrels. And again, you're going to want to also look at other factors that you might see, like firing aim stability. Again, this barrel has fire aim stability, so it's going to limit that shake, that wobble that you're seeing, that visual recoil, um, and that is incredibly important. So for this one, unless you're going some sort of really weird build, I think maybe you're trying to build a sniper support or something where you need that little extra mobility in close quarters combat, like you're going to choose the long barrel over the short barrel, I think 9 times out of 10, unless you're doing something real wonky. Lasers are tricky, but I think general rule of thumb, lasers are not worth it because there's usually, and I don't want to speak in absolutes, but there are usually other options in your grip or in your stock categories that will do similar or almost as good as a laser without um, losing your without the enemy being able to see a bright ass laser waving around them. So this is something that's going to give away your position without you even having to fire the gun. So more often than not, I would avoid lasers. The exception maybe is if you are just a hyper aggressive player and you're going to be pushing people, so they're going to know you're coming anyway, in which case, you know, a laser probably won't harm you as much as if you're playing at a slower pace where you're trying to catch people off guard. But you just kind of, again, look at the effects. Most of the effects of the lasers are going to be your aiming stability, but this is your firing aim stability. Or not your firing aim stability, I'm sorry, just normal aiming stability. So if you do not know, aiming stability is how much the gun shakes when you're aiming down sight and not shooting. So let me provide you an example real quick. Let me choose, I'll just choose this scope because it's pretty easy. You see I come up. All right, so I'm gonna aim this target. So when I scope in, I'm not moving my right stick at all, and as you can see, there's kind of some bobbing and some weaving. And up close, this makes little to no difference, but at range, you can see if I'm trying to hit headshots, you can see that it goes all the way from the head all the way down to the waist. So it's going to have a massive impact on your long-range guns, and this is very important for your long-range weapons, for your battle rifles, ARs, LMGs. So there are some lasers that might help you there. You might want to use that. Like this one doesn't show your laser, but generally speaking, again, you're going to find better attachments that do the same thing in other categories. But if you want to use a laser, by all means, go for it. When it comes to optics, again, firing aim stability is very, very important. That's why a lot of people use this Jack Glasses optic. It's very clear, it has firing aim stability bonuses, and it only hurts your ADS speed a little bit. Some of these aftermarket ones are very interesting. Like you have some thermals, some 4X in there. Generally speaking, what you're looking for in a sight is just something that you feel comfortable using. It's very subjective. Again, there's a few hidden gems in there, like I said, that give you fire and aim stability, or maybe provide certain benefit, like aim down sight speed benefit or something like that. When it comes to, also one thing to consider is the higher the magnification on a full auto gun, the more it will feel like it has high recoil. So the farther you are away from a target visually, meaning like iron sights or a low zoom optic like a dot, it's going to feel like there is less recoil. You use the same gun with a higher zoom, and it's going to feel like there is a lot more recoil going on just because of the perspective of you are looking closer to your target. So that's something to take into consideration. Generally speaking, even on a long range gun, you're probably not going to want to go farther than, say, a 4X. but most people are going to go to like a 2x or a dot sight. If you are sniping, then I would recommend you don't go any lower than a 5x, just because at the range that you would ideally be using a sniper, you want to have that sort of visual clarity to hit those headshots that you need to get those, those critical downs. Because they are firing slower, you want to make sure that you get as many headshots as possible because it'll be harder to hit that second follow-up shot. But again, most of it's suggestive or subjective. I just recommend a 2x or a dot sight and something that you feel comfortable with. Stocks, kind of the same story. What you're looking for in your long range guns are going to be aiming idle sway, fire and aim stability, recoil control, things like that. Like either like any of these are generally probably pretty good. Like even this precision stock, when you're looking at it and you're looking at the impact that it makes, you're like, oh, it only changes the recoil 5%. It hurts your ADS movement. So you might think to yourself, this attachment's worthless. But again, firing aim stability and aiming idle sway. So again, the amount your gun is swaying when you are scoped in but not firing. So this would actually be really good for a long range build because your gun's not going to sway a lot and you're going to have that really nice, clean firing smoothness. Plus you get a little bit of gun kick control. So this might actually be a really good attachment for this gun. Rear grip, same thing. Generally these are going to have like a flinch resistance, which is the case in this one. There's usually a recoil one, and then there's usually like a sprint to fire or an ADS increase. So you just have to weigh the benefits on each one. Magazine, depending on your game mode and how fast the gun shoots will be dependent on the size magazine you want to use. Generally speaking, for solos, you're going to want like at least a 30 or 40 round mag, but some guns have a 100 round mag. That's excessive. Like the AMR9 has a 100 round mag as an SMG. You will almost never need 100 rounds in an SMG in solos. So take that into consideration. And generally speaking, you're not going to, even though this, for example, this 50 round drum massively affects your handling and mobility, you're going to have to just sacrifice that. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough bullets to get downs and get kills. And especially if you're playing in like trios or quads, you're at a massive disadvantage by not running that 50 round mag. Like you're just going to have to accept the downsides. Ammunition's very interesting because there's a little different effects, but really there's only a few that you're going to choose from. One is high velocity, again, because bullet velocity will lead to the feeling of accuracy because you will have to lead your targets less. And again, very important and very helpful when you're trying to shoot people out of the air. The only other one that I think anyone uses is the high grain rounds. This gives you bullet velocity and range benefit at the cost of some recoil control. So it's really good on, lower recoil guns, sniper rifles, some SMGs. You can use high grain rounds. So, but I would say out of most attachments, the adding ammunition is something where it's like, oh, I don't really need another attachment, so I will throw on a high grain or high velocity. And lastly, underbarrel, very similar to the muzzle. Most of these are going to affect either your recoil, your aim idle sway, or your movement, something like that. You do have some of these kind of quirky attachments like the flamethrower or this chainsaw thing. If you want to make a fun class, go for it. But in terms of just shooting your gun and having added benefit there, you're going to want to stick to something like the Bruin Heavy Support Grip. I really also like the XRK bow breaker. It's similar to the Bruin Heavy Support Grip. Has some aiming idle sway, fire and aim stability. This one just impacts your vertical recoil and your recoil gun kick, whereas the Bruin Heavy Support Grip is horizontal and recoil gun kicked. When you are looking at things that change your recoil patterns. I think more than anything, what you want is something that's going to affect your horizontal recoil, because if your gun is if the only recoil you have is vertical, all you have to do is pull down on your right analog stick or pull down on your mouse, and boom, your gun is firing perfectly straight. So generally speaking, most people go for the Bruin Heavy Support Grip or some other attachment that affects your horizontal recoil. That is what I would recommend. And then maybe depending on your gun, you may go with something that improves your mobility. But on a long range gun, you're going to want something that affects your horizontal recoil. Like this is also a very good one. Improves your horizontal recoil quite a bit. Doesn't impact your ADS speed at all. So this is just as good as, say, the Bruin Heavy Support Grip, but just doesn't impact your recoil gun kick. So just some things to look out for. Feel like that kind of gives you a broad thing. If I were to build out the subverter, I'm using the Cassis brake. I'm using the Heavy Support Grip because let's just take a look real quick at what the recoil pattern looks like on this gun. So as you can see, it goes up and left, and then up and right, and then back up and left. So on this one, eliminating that horizontal, that left to right, is going to be absolutely crucial. So Cassis brake, because it improves horizontal recoil. The Bruin Heavy Support Grip, because it improves horizontal recoil. The long barrel for fire and aim stability, recoil control. You pretty much have to have a 50-round mag. And then that leaves me one thing, which is going to be the dot sight. So this is a pretty ideal class. This is like what you would consider meta. It's much easier to control. And if you look at the recoil pattern between these two, it does still have some of that left to right, but it is much less pronounced, much easier to control. So those are your long range guns. Let's do an SMG. Of course, we all know the HRM was meta forever, so we'll just pull that up and look at it. So SMGs, as opposed to looking at your range, your bullet velocity, what you're really looking for is you're going to look for hopefully a really good fast fire rate. Obviously, you still want good damage, but you also want really good mobility, especially in, like, if you're playing Rebirth, but even in the big map, mobility is key. You want to be able to have the ability to outmaneuver your opponents, because even if you are maybe, I'm trying to think how to word this, movement is going to dictate a lot of close quarters gunfights, because especially if two really good players in terms of aim, let's say two players using the exact same gun, same setup, and they both have really good aim, the one that's able to dodge some bullets and get the other player to miss is going to win that gunfight more often than not. And that's why movement's so important, because you need to be able to slide, you need to be able to jump and slide, drop shot. Also, if you put bullets into someone and you're chasing them, you need that movement speed. ADS movement speed, you need to be able to strafe left and right. All those things are very critical. So I'm not going to go through each thing again, because they all kind of apply. It's just you're looking for different things. For SMGs, I tend to find that this flash compensator works incredibly well, the Zim. It lowers recoil a fair bit. It also, again, has that sweet, juicy fire and aim stability, and has the added benefit of shortening your radar ping, so you stay on the radar less than using a different compensator. Again, I'm not going to go through each one, but generally speaking, you're going to want to build something that balances recoil and your speed. One thing to consider that may be different than your long distance ones is, since you are up close, again, you're still going to have that aiming idle sway. So the gun is bobbing up and down, left and right when you're aimed down sight. But you're using an SMG at most probably this range, you know, that like 20-meter range. And so your firing or your aiming idle sway is not going to be that impactful. So what you're building for is some recoil control, some movement, and maybe bullet velocity if it's like a sniper support. So the HRM is very versatile. You can go a lot of different ways with it. So for example, I'll show you my speed build for it. This is like I'm rushing, but I need to balance. So I'm going to use the no stock. As you can see, massive improvements across the board on mobility and handling at a massive cost to recoil control. So I'll show you just real quick what this gun looks like. Obviously very hard to control the recoil with no stock. So I'm going to look for the Zim compensated. We'll go through, like, what does this look like now just with one attack? So that is a drastic change in and of itself. It still wobbles quite a bit left to right. So I'm going to look for something that, you know, you could add a barrel that maybe affects your recoil control. Maybe an under barrel that affects your recoil control. But for me, I like the grip. This assault grip is good. It barely impacts your ADS speed. It has some firing aim stability, so let's add that on there. Go into the range. What does that look like? Pretty easy to control, at least for a controller player. 30 rounds is not enough, so I know I need a 50-round mag. And then what do I want left? What do I want left? I could go with maybe, you know, maybe the long barrel for a little bit more range. That's definitely not a bad idea. But for me, since this is my aggressive build and I'm pushing people, I'm getting in their face, I'm going to go with the DR6 hand stop. Just more mobility, gets me to my enemies faster, allows me to strafe, and I still have pretty good control with the attachments that I have. At least enough for, you know, that 10 to 20 meter range. You could also use this for a sniper support. So for that, you know, maybe you want to go with the long barrel. So you get that range, that bullet velocity that you need for those, you know, going for the 20 to maybe 30 and 40 meter range before you're pulling out your sniper rifle. Maybe you throw in an optic so that you have those, you know, that you have a dot to look at. And then definitely probably the folding stock gives you a lot of recoil control, minimal impact to ADS speed. And then, you know, you could go, maybe this is where you're putting on the high grain rounds to add even more range and bullet velocity. Now you have a pretty good sniper support here. Very easy to control the recoil. You know, still wobbles a little bit, so you know at that 40, 50 meter range going to be pretty difficult, but not a bad option. So these are the things that you're going to go through when you're building out these classes. Again, long range guns, you're building for range, you're building for some recoil, but really firing aim stability, aiming idle sway, those are things, and bullet velocity, those are things that you really, really are trying to optimize for, as long as it doesn't impact your handling drastically. Okay? So, and then SMGs, again, range, bullet velocity, aiming idle sway, those things are not too important. Some firing aim stability, some movement, those are what's going to be most important. So that's long range, short range. Shotguns aren't really too meta, but this is something where, you know, you're really, I guess, this is where you're going to want to balance some speed as well as your hip fire. So this is something where you're going to actually look at tactical stance spread and your hip fire. So you know, you want your hip fire max to be very, very low. That's the amount of bloom you're going to get whenever you're firing or moving. So just to show you here, so we can kind of see here. I'm trying to think of something to compare this to. Let's see. If we stand on this, let's stand on this 2. You kind of see it takes up this whole area at the bottom left of this board. If we go to build something and like, let's see what we can add on here. Probably, let's see, an underbarrel. This one impacts quite a bit. I'm sure there's a grip that impacts it. No. This is where you would probably consider actually a laser, because you're going to be right in their face anyway. So they're going to know you're there. So you might as well be visible. Let's see. The no stock gives you mobility, which you definitely need. And then maybe some extra range. Let's see. I don't know if there's any muzzles that affect. There we go. Definitely does. All right. So now when we stand on the 2, you can see how massive of a difference that makes in your hip fire spread. So shotguns, that's what you're looking for. Again, under the accuracy, you're going to look for hip fire spread min, hip fire spread max, maybe tactical stance. Aim down sight. I don't know what button it will be for you, but for me it's down on my D-pad. And this gives you the benefits of aiming down sight. Without having to look at this. And it's also so much cleaner. This is very good for PC players. Okay. And then lastly, I guess we can do snipers. But it's really straightforward. Similar to your other long range options, you're looking for aiming idle sway. You're looking for aim down sight speed and bullet velocity and range. Bullet velocity of all the guns, sniper rifles, bullet velocity is the most impacted because you are taking shots at usually the longest ranges. So the less you have to try and guess and lead your target, the better you are. Yep. If you want to go with a quick scoping build, then maybe you're not so worried about bullet velocity. But for me, aiming idle sway, bullet velocity, and somewhere around the ballpark of like 400 ADS speed of 700, I think is probably the max you want to go. That's like, let's look at the CAT AMR. This is like the slow firing, slow moving, but headshots at an infinite range. When we look at this, so 666, so close to 700 ADS speed. That's about the max you want to go on a sniper rifle. Okay. There you go. So as far as gun attachments, there you go. I guess we can talk about tacticals and perks real quick. So tacticals, everyone uses smokes. Everything else is generally pretty useless except for maybe stuns and flashes. Flashes are tough because if you throw them behind your opponent, it doesn't affect them at all. I'm not sure if stuns are that way, but stuns can be effective. But generally speaking, smokes are going to be the way to go. Maybe you can get by with a stem. It does give you a speed boost and obviously heals you mid gunfights, so that can be beneficial, but it's kind of niche. Usually better for rebirth, where you don't always have time to put on plates, so you just need to heal and you get that speed boost. And out of the lethals, these are actually pretty, you can use a variety of them. I personally really like thermites. You can throw them a long ways. You can hit people behind cover with them. You can stick riot shielders with them and kill them. you can thirst people with them. They're great against vehicles. They're just all around great. The only problem is you can only throw them like in a straight line. It's hard to kind of get an arc to them. They also are not in ground loot, so you will rarely find them off dead bodies. Frag grenades are great. The thermobaric grenades are great. They explode, which cause damage. They fire, which cause damage. They also stun your enemy, so those can be really, really strong as well. Breacher drones, kind of the same as thermites, except for they take a little bit of time to kind of line up, but they have infinite range, which is a benefit. They're very powerful once they explode, but they're just a little bit slower. And again, you can't arch them or arc them like on top of a building or something. So they're limited. They're a little limited in that regard. C4s and Simtexes, great. C4s again, of course, you have to throw and then detonate, so it can take a little bit of time. But you can also throw them against a wall and bait people around a corner and blow them up. They have good uses there. Really, with all these, you can't go wrong. If you didn't know, the throwing knife got nerfed, so it only downs someone if they're already weak or you get a headshot with the knife, but they will thirst someone in one shot. So maybe if you're playing quads, a throwing knife might be good, or rebirth when you're downing people and you just want to down them and get the finish really quick. But generally speaking, I think what you're going to see is frag grenades, Simtexes, and probably C4s. If you play passively, then maybe consider, a Claymore or the Bouncing Betty, or the Proximity Mine. And then perks, just going through these real quick. In your first two slots, you have the same option of perks. You don't need Scavenger because people almost always drop money, plates, and ammunition. Battle Hardened is not super effective because most people don't use stuns or flashes or anything like that. Sleight of Hand is usually pretty good. It affects different weapons differently, so it's not a flat it's not a flat, say, 20% reduction in reload speed. But if you have, say, an LMG or something like that with a belt clip or a belt fed ammo, you may want to run Sleight of Hand. Focus I actually really like Focus for sniping. When the game first rolled out and I was sniping a lot, I used Focus. And it's generally very effective, but only really if you're sniping. It doesn't really affect you if you're using any other gun but a sniper. Double time is very helpful. Strong arm and C4 combination is incredible. You can throw C4s a mile. You can throw them on top of buildings you wouldn't normally be able to. So I could actually see strong arm and C4s kind of coming into the meta, maybe once people catch on to that. Shrapnel, no one uses. EOD, actually probably not the worst thing. If you really don't know what to use, maybe there's a meta coming up where people are using grenades a lot. Maybe they buff some grenades and, people are using them like crazy, then maybe EOD. But this is more of like a multiplayer perk. Spotter's worthless. Mechanic is worthless. Irradiated is very good, but it is only good in situations involving the gas. So, whereas Sleight of Hand, Double Time, Strong Arm, Mountaineer, all these perks are helping you throughout the duration of the game. Irradiated is only helping you in situations with gas, so I tend to avoid it. Mountaineer, out of these, Mountaineer, Double Time, and Sleight of Hand, I think are the three best perks to use. Mountaineer is amazing. You can jump from ridiculous heights without taking fall damage or taking a little bit of fall damage, whereas you would normally die. I have never not run Mountaineer. I think it is probably just hands down just the best perk because you use it so much and it's so valuable in so many different situations. So 10 out of 10 would recommend. Mountaineer and Sleight of Hand. The third one, there's actually a few. Hey Justin, I'm doing a video. Hold on one sec, bud. Quick Fix is very good. It's definitely really good if you're playing in squad modes. because as soon as you put a plate in, it's going to heal you up automatically. If you get it down, it automatically heals you up. So if you're playing Rebirth, if you're playing squads, I would highly recommend Quick Fix. If you're more of a passive player, especially if you're holding rooftops or holding power positions, resupply can be really good with coupled with um, bouncing betties or proximity mines and claymores, something like that. Or just generally, even for aggressive players, it's good because then you don't have to take time to throw a munition box. You can just generally have a lethal and a tactical on hand at all times. So that can be very good. Stalker is very good if you have a high mobility build. If you are just using a normal build that's not necessarily maxed out for mobility, Stalker is not going to affect you very much. But say you build like a tack stance build, something that's going to have a very high strafe speed, Stalker will increase that drastically. So that might be something you look at, but probably not meta. Tracker is okay, but I think with footsteps and the audio, I think is in a pretty good place. So I don't think you really need it as long as someone is moving. Tempered is good. Again, kind of like Quick Fix. You could use these interchangeably, but I would not choose Tempered because you can usually find a Tempered vest in the game. So I would rather have Quick Fix and Tempered as opposed to just taking Tempered on my loadout. Lastly, Cold Blooded, which is kind of hit or miss. It's okay, but again, it only helps you in certain situations. So not necessarily something that you need to pick. And Primed is meh, and Escapist is terrible. I would not recommend it. And then lastly, for your fourth perk, you have Flex, which is something that I ran almost exclusively for the duration of Warzone thus far, but that was because the audio wasn't great, and I felt like this actually gave me the ability to hear people a lot better. It also is really good if you are an aggressive player. You're pushing buildings where people have claymores and proximity mines because you can run right through them. You can run through cluster mines. And so, in that regard, it's really, really good. It can kind of give away enemy positions because it gives you a beep when there's enemy equipment nearby. So, to me, this is top tier, but maybe not as much anymore because I don't think it affects the audio. Right now, I'm testing Combat Scout a lot. I find it really good because you ping enemies. A lot of players are throwing smokes to kind of cover. And unless they're running cold blooded, you can continue to shoot them through the smoke. Or if you're chasing them, you know what room they went into, you know which corner they might have ducked into. So Combat Scout is actually proven to be very effective. I would never run Resolute or Shrouded. Um, and then Ghost and Bird's Eye. They're two great perks, especially for better players using Bird's Eye because you're usually going to be popping UAVs, you're going to be chasing kills. Bird's Eye can be great, but again, you can pick it up from a vest. So, and you almost always find at least one in a game. So, in that case, I'm not usually using it. Ghost can be really good, but like for me, I don't use suppressed weapons. So people are going to know where I am anyway. So Ghost doesn't really bother me. I also don't mind people knowing where I am and pushing me because to me that's more kills. So I don't use Ghost, but if you're more of a stealthy player, I think it's an excellent choice. And High Alert, still very good overall, but again can be countered incredibly easy by the use of Cold Blooded. So I don't think it's exceptionally reliable. And also find myself when I do use it, I rely on it too much instead of using my instincts and my overall awareness. So I think it kind of makes you a little bit of a it. I think if you rely on it too much, it can make you a worse player actually overall. So, but it's still a very good perk as long as you rely on yourself as well. So, to me, that is the best way to build your loadouts, the attachments that you want to use, the things that you're looking for to build the optimal loadouts. If you found this video helpful, feel free to leave a like. If you disliked it, then by all means dislike it. Leave me a comment with any questions or critiques you might have. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much.